The Impossible Fair. How did they even pull this off? In 1893, Chicago hosted the Columbian Exposition, a world's fair unlike anything seen before or since. More than 200 massive buildings, miles of canals, statues, bridges, and an entire exhibition halls packed with artifacts and technology from around the world, all built from scratch. But let's stop and ask, how? How did they actually do this? Step 1, planning the impossible. You don't just wake up one day and build an entire city from nothing. It took years of planning. In 1885, cities began competing for the honor of hosting the fair. Chicago won the bid in 1890, just 3 years before opening day. 3 years to design, source, build, and coordinate what would become the largest event in American history up to that point. Think about it, over 200 buildings, all construction before modern machinery, modern equipment and lifts and hoists, power tools and computers in just 3 years. Step 2, who built it and where did they stay? Over 40,000 laborers worked on the fairgrounds, twice the number who built the Panama Canal. They weren't just Chicagoans, they came from across the country, immigrants, craftsmen and engineers, lured by the promise of steady pay. But where did they live? Most stayed in makeshift labor camps near Jackson Park, where they worked 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Some stayed in boarding houses, while others crammed into hastily built dormitories. Sanitation? Forget about it. These camps were filled with disease, accidents, and exhaustion. And let's not even get into safety conditions, because OSHA didn't even exist yet. Step 3, moving the materials. The fair was built with a mix of wood, iron, and plaster, with materials coming from all over the country. But some pieces, they came from halfway across the world. Italian marble for sculptures, exquisite paintings and artifacts from European museums, exhibits from Egypt, Japan, and India. Massive steel trusses for the manufacturers and liberal arts building. Imagine this, a priceless Renaissance painting had to be carefully packed, shipped across the Atlantic by a steamer, unloaded onto trains, transported inland by wagon or rail, unpacked and displayed without breaking or getting lost. And this wasn't just 1 or 2 pieces, it was thousands of priceless objects. And here's the kicker, there was no easy way to call in an order. Telephones existed, but long-distance calling was rare. Most of this was done by letters and telegraphs, meaning orders had to be placed months, sometimes years in advance. Step 4, how did they even get this many people here? 27 million visitors came to the fair, a quarter of the U.S. population at the time. That's the equivalent of 85 million Americans traveling to a single event today. But this was before commercial airlines, and highways didn't exist. So how did they get there? Trains, thousands of them. Special rail lines were built leading straight into the fairgrounds. The Illinois Central Railroad expanded service just to handle the crowds. The South Side Elevated Railroad, now part of Chicago's L system, opened in 1892, just in time for the fair. Streetcars and wagons carried visitors the last few miles, and once they arrived, the sheer logistics of moving them around inside the fairground was its own nightmare. Horse-drawn wagons, gondolas, and even moving sidewalks helped keep people moving. Step 5, food, bathrooms, and the other stuff no one thinks about. What does it take to feed 27 million people in 6 months? Vendors had to prepare hundreds of thousands of meals per day. The fair gave the world some of its most famous snacks, Cracker Jack, juicy fruit gum, and Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, but it also had restaurants, bakeries, and cafes running at full speed. And let's talk about bathrooms. Think of a concert or stadium today. Now multiply that by 100. The fair had some of the first large-scale public restrooms, but for modern standards, they were a disaster. Thousands of wooden outhouses, primitive plumbing, horrible sanitation. With that many people using primitive restrooms, you can only imagine what the smell was like. Step 6, the grand finale, and then it was gone. The fair lasted 6 months, and then it was gone. Most of the buildings, including the manufacturers and liberal arts building, were never meant to last. They were built out of wood and plaster, designed to stand for a year, then disappear. After the fair closed, they were torn down or abandoned. Then, in 1894, a massive fire wiped out what little remained. Imagine if Disney World was built, visited by half the country, and then demolished after 1 season. The big question, could we even do this today? Could we build a city of over 200 buildings, plan for 85 million people, ship priceless artifacts from around the world, house tens of thousands of workers, and light an entire thing with a brand new technology in 3 years? Could we coordinate all this with no internet, no computers, no modern highways, no airplanes? And if we could, how much would it cost today? Hundreds of billions? A trillion? It's almost impossible to imagine, but they actually did it. Want to know more? And this was just one of 200 plus buildings at the fair. There were entire exhibits dedicated to electricity, fine arts, transportation, agriculture, and even a replica of a Viking ship. Want to hear more about what was inside in the other 199 buildings? Drop a comment below and let me know which ones you want me to cover next. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more fun friggin' facts.